Animals respond to the presence of predatory threat, such as sudden movements or the presence of another creature, by their scent or appearance, which allows them to distinguish between predatory and non-predatory species. Many animals spend their whole life in this environment and are constantly on the lookout for danger. Homo sapiens would also have faced similar threats, where today we live in relative safety compared to our ancestors. I say relative safety because for some people they have found themselves in similar situations that their Homo sapien ancestors would have faced. Imagine that you are in the middle of nowhere and sense the presence of something or someone, and eventually come to the conclusion that you are being hunted and are miles away from safety, and the fear that would instantly embrace you. The following are two stories about people who felt they were being hunted or stalked in the middle of nowhere. Steve Ballard. Steve was camping in the middle of nowhere in Washington State near Mount Rainier, which was so far into the forest that you would not expect to see another human for miles around. One night he was awoken by the sound of something outside of the tent, and when he looked out, he could see a man sitting close to where the campfire had been. There was nothing unusual looking about him, just the normal-looking guy just sitting a few feet from his tent. However, what struck him was that he had no bag or backpack. He just looked like a normal guy sitting there, but why was he in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night, with no backpack? When he heard Steve opening the tent, he quickly turned around and his eyes just stared at him, as if he'd just seen a ghost, and he quickly ran away. Steve was as surprised to see him as he was to see the man, and he was badly shaken up. The following day, Steve managed to put the incident out of his mind and assumed it was just some guy that had probably set up a tent a short distance from his campsite. 2 days later, and about 50 miles from where he initially set up camp, and again in the middle of nowhere, he was sitting by the campfire at night and could hear noises that he was convinced was coming from another person. In the dark of night, he called out to whoever it was, and they responded with, "Do you know how to get to Bell's Canyon?" Steve said, "No, I don't even think that's a real place," and they kept talking. He was frustrated because he could hear them talking but could not see anyone. He shone his torch, but the guy screamed, "Aim that away!" Steve was now feeling spooked, as he did not want to annoy a potentially crazy person. After about 15 minutes of being scared out of his wits, where they continued to talk and asked totally random questions in the dark, their voices seemed to get closer, so he quickly shone his torch again and could see it was the same guy who had been sitting outside his tent 2 nights ago. He must have been following him for the past 2 days over a distance of about 15 miles. There is no possible way that he could have randomly wound up outside his campsite in the wilderness. As soon as the light from his torch hit him, he again ran away. This time he decided to chase him, but after about 200 feet, he stopped running, as he did not want to get lost in the dark. Steve came to the uneasy conclusion that this man was following him, and figured his camping trip was over, and he would hike back first thing in the morning. The journey would take him 3 days, where he was constantly doubling back in order to throw him off his tail. Steve occasionally hid to see if he was following him, and was terrified, as it felt as if he was being hunted through the wilderness. He now had to think of ways to avoid being murdered, and was now in survival mode. On the very first night of his return journey, he twice heard what sounded like someone walking around in circles outside his tent. By the time he'd worked up the courage to check, there was nobody there. On the second night, he heard what he initially thought were animal noises in the distance, but soon realized it could be someone making animal noises. He was becoming paranoid, possibly confusing animal noises with human noises. After a while, he was convinced it was a person making howling noises. When he finally got back to the safety of his car, he literally cried with relief, as the fear had been so strong. It was the most terrifying experience of his life, and he had no idea who the person was or what his intentions were, and would never be able to find out. For Steve Ballard, it was the most terrifying few days of his life, along with the fear that he felt. Sarah Connolly. Sarah had been running in the same woods for as long as she could remember, but the following incident would make her change her mind. It started around 6:30 p.m. when, a short time after finishing her meal, decided to go for a run. Sarah always took the same route across the path, then across the street, where she would run for about 1 kilometre before passing through a gate that led to the woods. The trail she took to the forest was separated about halfway through, where one side was paved and the other wasn't. Sarah would take the unpaved path first and then turn into the paved path after about 3 kilometres. During her run, she would occasionally see people walking their dogs, but other than that, she was mostly by herself, or so she thought. She'd been running for a while before receiving a notification from her phone. It was an airdrop notification. She did not want to appear worried, so she kept running before stopping to change the music. She decided to open the airdrop and wondered who was sending her a message, as she was certain she was alone. As she clicked on the drop, her heart sank. It was a Snapchat picture of her, running with the caption, "You look good." She did not turn around and decided to keep running as if nothing had happened. She reached a point where the forest was surrounded by a fence to stop children from entering unsupervised. As a child, she did not like that rule, so her and her friends cut a hole in it. When she was close to the hole, she quickly turned in order to bury herself in the forest in the hope of escaping from whoever it was that was photographing her. She then heard a rustling sound behind her, but continued to run and did not look back until she reached the hole in the fence. After running through the hole, she ran to the fire station a few streets down. The last thing she heard after leaving the forest was an angry huff and metal meeting metal. Sarah had no idea who it was, or what they wanted, or whether they just wanted to scare her or something worse, but she never ran in that forest again.